Aloha. Welcome to American Issues Take One. I'm Tim Apicella, your host, and today's title is Trump's 100 Days. He overshot the runway. If you guys watched yesterday on the news, Trump was in Warren, Michigan. And why he was in Warren, Michigan is to talk about the tariffs and specifically related to the auto industry. And he made a quote that caught my attention. And I love it. It's almost like he's on the campaign trail again, and it's re-election time all over again, even though we just got over that. He said, and I quote, "I'm going to give you the greatest economy in the history of the world, and it's already happening." Now, I selected that quote for a reason, and that's because the polling does not suggest that. The polling, not only about tariffs, but about his implementation of deportation, the immigration issues, his attack on law firms, his attack on universities, his gutting of federal agencies through DOGE. The polling does not suggest he's being successful in the least bit of data. Not only that, but we have some economic indicators starting to indicate that our economy is starting to slow down. And those have come out in the last few days. So the claims he's making, as he always does, are bold-faced lies in face of what the reality is taking place. And I suppose that I would like to talk about his first 100 days and the court decisions and the polling data. Has Donald Trump overshot the runway? And with me to discuss that are my esteemed guests, David Larson, Ben Davis, Chuck Crumpton, and my co-host, Jay Fidell. Good morning, gentlemen.
Hey.
Jay, to you first. You've seen all the reports in the last few days about polling. I know you're not a big fan of polling, but the numbers are overwhelming. There are clear indications, clear patterns, the number of polls being taken place, and the percentage differences are notable. And so let's talk about that. How is Donald Trump doing in his first 100 days? And all these attacks on DOGE and on the universities and the agencies and his 142 executive orders, is he losing his mojo?
Well, the polls are terrible for him. It shows that there's somebody out there who is awake and alive and watching television or reading the newspaper and finding that his promises are not coming true. At the same time, however, that doesn't seem to bother him. You know, he has all these techniques for dealing with reduced polls and, you know, negative things around his presidency. And one of them, the most consistent, is he lies. And he tells you that, oh, the polls aren't true. That's all fake news. And he attacks the pollsters. He attacks the media. And so he's got techniques. And so his base is still in large part behind him. And the question is whether the protesters in the street have any effect on this, whether the protesters in the street have any effect on Congress, on the Supreme Court, and on the judiciary in general. So I'm not sure. I think the jury, excuse the term, is still out on whether the polls have any real effect. But suffice to say, and we do care about the polls, that the polls are terrible. And the polls are likely to get worse for him. So the question is, where does it all go from there?
Okay, let's hit the polls. I know you, in previous shows, you've not been a fan of polling data. Is this different?
Yeah, it is. It is different, Tim.
Okay.
Because all the polls are universally the same. And all the polls are being reported by all the media, including Fox Media. You know, the message is unanimous, if you will, around the country, at least as far as the pollsters are concerned. I don't think there's any poll that says he's doing a good job. I don't think there's anybody, although there are some people in Congress, and it's just really surprising, who say, no, he's doing a good job. We just have to look more carefully. I swear to God, incredible that they say these things. But the polls are different now because the polls are unanimous and the media is respecting them pretty much unanimously.
Okay, good. Last question. He has over 142 executive orders. Many of those are being blocked by the judicial courts, both federal, the Supreme Court in some cases. And those of the 142, 46 involve government and the overhaul of government, 39 involve national security, and 26 domestic policy and culture. In the past, we've said that all these executive orders were nothing more than distractions. Why do you think he's issued that many executive orders, not worked with Congress at all, even though he has the majority in the Senate and the House? Has he overshot the runway? Did he intend to overshoot the runway? Is this a big distraction, or is he just miscalculation?
Yes, and yes.
I love when you do that.
No, I mean, no, he's trying to increase his power. He's ruling as one person. And one really remarkable statement he made was, "I run the country and I run the world." That's what he's getting to, and this whole thing with the executive orders is a way to do that. Some of his executive orders are clearly unconstitutional, but that's part of his testing of the judiciary and the Supreme Court. So he's really pushing it as far as he can. Some people believe that he has the power, and I think ultimately the courts will have a big problem in finding that he has the power. But let's see what happens. He's doing this to be more powerful.
Okay, thank you. Ben, to you. Let's go to, I think, one of the more notable cases of the judicial system coming out against Donald Trump. And that, of course, that is the deportation of Kilmore Garcia. That case. Donald Trump has basically refused to facilitate the return of this individual that was sent to El Salvador. He was just recently on an interview with Terry Moran for ABC, and Terry Moran said, "Hey, you seem to be not going along with the judge's orders to facilitate the return of Mr. Garcia." And he said, "There's the phone right there. You can call him." Donald Trump said, "I could." Then Donald Trump said, look at this guy. He has tattoos on his knuckles. He's clearly a member of the gang MS-13. Well, the media has since said, and right during that interview said, that was photoshopped onto his knuckles. Donald Trump didn't have a response to that. Then the last thing he said is, "Hey, I'm not involved with this. This is my attorneys. It's not me. It's them. I'm just following the law." Given this case and the exposure of this case, and the polling that we see about this case and the unlawful lack of due process for deportation, is Donald Trump wise to keep stringing this along, or should he just retract and say, "Let's get him back"? Where are you on this thought?
The famous quote from President Truman was, "The buck stops over there."
Whoa. Touche.
Not here, not over there.
Yeah, okay. Over there.
So go talk to them over there. Them lawyers, Well,
that's why you guys get paid the big bucks to take the blame, right?
That's right. Well, I would just say the fun of this is when he was in the Oval Office with Bukele, he said, "I can't do anything. It's up to him." And Bukele says, "I can't do anything." And then today it's like, "Yeah, I could, but I'm not going to." He is setting himself up for somebody being charged with contempt. Somebody under him, my guess would be Stephen Miller, Nome, and Secretary Nome, maybe little Marco Rubio. But we'll just see what happens.
But let me ask you this. I mean, Donald Trump does care about polling numbers. We know that. He cares about the media. He watches it constantly. How is this serving Donald Trump and his concern for polling numbers when he's obstinate and knows that Americans don't like him deporting people without due process, whether he's a gang member or not, which we don't know if he is or isn't. But it's not an issue of the membership. It's the issue of the lack of due process and basically obscuring or trying to get around the law. How does that serve Donald Trump?
Those were kind of made for television deportations with lots of filming and done like that. Actually reminded me of Leni Riefenstahl and the Nazis, but that's just me. But he showed some of that in Warren, Michigan, and people cheered. Okay, so you gotta understand there is a part of us in this America who likes these people not caring they had due process, because if the president just says something, somebody's bad, they go along with it. So it is a problem. It is a huge problem because it's also happening to American citizens now, not just to some foreigner, but it's American citizens now too, as people have warned about. If you don't give due process to one, it's going to affect all of us. But I'm not sure enough Americans really believe that yet, unfortunately.
Okay. David, recently in this last week or so, there's been 11 lawsuits that both liberal judges, conservative judges that were appointed by Trump, they've come out very, very decidedly against Donald Trump and some of his maneuvers, specifically one about Harvard and a violation of Harvard's First Amendment rights that they were trying to, the judge said that Trump is trying to coerce and control Harvard. We have one on Tuesday where the judges blocked gutting the Voice of America. We have another one where the judge issued a ruling that his executive orders on election reform is a power grab for the executive office. And so he's been blocked in that area. Another one is that collective bargaining for over 37 agencies and departments that trying to douse the ability for collective bargaining. These court either injunctions or decisions are certainly not going Donald Trump's way. The question is, how do you perceive all these losses for Donald Trump, and does that inhibit him from making more crazy executive orders and or the synergy or the wind behind his sails that he thought he had in the last 100 days?
Well, one thing it doesn't do, it hasn't prevented him from golfing, as he's spending almost every weekend on the golf course. That's discouraging. But yeah, we talk about constitutional crisis, and that's what we're in right now. We have a system of checks and balances, and courts are theoretically supposed to be a check on the executive. And he's challenging that. Courts are coming out with opinions and orders that are contrary to what he'd like to do, and he's just choosing to ignore them. And that should be frightening, I think, to every American right now. And we need to be paying attention to that. Why is he doing that? Well, I have to believe that he knows that some of these aren't going to be successful, but it sure gets a lot of people's attention. And while people are paying a lot of attention to outrageous positions, for example, ignoring legal contracts called collective bargaining agreements, or discharging tens of thousands of federal employees when they all have constitutional rights because there's state action in the workplace, and there has to be due process. While everybody's getting all focused on those kinds of actions, he can push through a tax bill that gives tremendous tax benefits to billionaires. What he said would be the quid pro quo, where there are massive donations, and that went through really relatively quietly. And people should have been much more outraged about that tax bill than perhaps some of these other things, because the long-term effects of that are really destructive. So I think the strategy is to distract. I'll take a shot and try and expand my power. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it, but I'm going to be able to do a lot of other things while people are debating the propriety of me doing these things that I want to accomplish. And in fact, I'm having some success doing that. So
I guess that's where I'm confused, because if he wants to get that tax provision passed, he needs both the Senate and the House. Now, if his popularity is going down over a variety of issues, and these poll numbers are coming from red states as well, and a lot of these senators and House representatives from red states are being taken to the, they're being taken out and spanked right there in the public meetings. His popularity for all these executive orders that he's been signing, how does that not provide a gateway from the disgruntled voter to the representatives in the House, to the senators from that state? And how does that help them pass a sweeping tax bill when those poor representatives and senators are getting bludgeoned?
Man, logic would say, you're right. You know, that's going to interfere with his ability to get this legislation passed. But remarkably, when these representatives, Congress and Senate, leave their home states and come back to Washington, it's a magical transformation. And they fall right back into line. You know, whatever they said to their constituents when they were home doesn't really matter when they're face to face to the president. And we are still seeing people falling in line, again, with I think the threat that if you don't fall in line, I'm gonna support a candidate in the next election against you, and you won't win. And sadly enough, people are prioritizing their reelection chances over their obligations to represent the best interests of their constituents, and that's why he's kind of banking on that. He's banking that he can motivate these people in their own self-interest to get reelected and do what he wants them to do, as opposed to stepping up and protecting his constituents.
Yeah. In hockey, they have a term called the enforcer. And regarding the threat to primary someone that's not going along to get along, we had Elon Musk making the threats as an enforcer and his money. Do you think that Elon Musk is still a factor in these type of threats against Republican House members and Senate?
Well, there's a little bit of a delicious irony here. You know, as the tariffs come into play, you've seen Tesla stock getting bludgeoned on the stock market, and tariffs suddenly really hurting his company. I think after the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, which the Republicans lost, and the liberal justice won, and guarantees now a liberal bench in Wisconsin till at least 2027. I think that really soured Republicans on Elon Musk. He personally appeared, alienated a lot of voters in Wisconsin. They resented him being there. The idea he could come in and somehow sway the election. So I think he had been losing mileage. People had been concerned about how is this unelected person have so much influence. But I think that those events in Wisconsin really have damaged his stature. And yeah, I think his influence is falling. And my understanding is his resignation is imminent.
Okay, thank you for your perspective on that. Chuck, kind of a generic question, not the always easiest. I save the hard ones for you. I try to. What's your take on the last 100 days? Question number one. And question number two is, what's in the tea leaves for the next future 100 days?
Well, there's some things that the media aren't really talking about front and center yet that seem to be worthy of attention. One is Trump's mental decline. If you look at that interview with Terry, the ABC journalist, he gets into an argument over photoshopping the MS-13 onto the knuckles, and he completely loses it, and he's not able to get off of that and get past it. And even when Terry tries to go to other topics, he can't do it. I mean, he's mentally not there. And you've seen that in other conversations. Second thing, relating to Musk. Okay, as a narcissist, he is not going to want Musk to be front and center anymore. Now he's got that. Musk is off to the side. Is he going to be able to get Musk to come back and put another 270, 300 million into campaigns? Not for him in 2026, but for down ballot people? Very unlikely. The third thing that Ben and David have alluded to, and Jay as well, is besides the mental deterioration of Trump that's visible, whether it's Harvard, whether it's the New York Times today coming out against him, there are major institutional media, corporate, educational, healthcare organizations and leaders who are now willing to step forward. And there are a lot of people in the back. So Ben's very insightful comments about when does the indignation begin to overwhelm the fear and people step forward, that's what we may be starting to see. Momentum is shifting.
Okay, so, President Johnson felt the momentum shift, and what started off kind of slow in 1966, 67 was at a crescendo in 1968, 69, 70. Donald Trump, number one, do you believe that Donald Trump overshot the runway in his first 100 days? And secondly, do we see more visible protests, both in print, TV, news, and on the streets? Will we have another President Johnson moment here, or does he escape that?
Well, you got to remember, Tim, that having gotten rid of and impugned air traffic controllers, Trump has no idea where the runway even is. And they're not going to tell him.
Okay. Good job. Okay, I like that answer. That's a good one. Thank you. Thanks, Chuck. Jay, back to the polling a little bit. You and I have had conversations that he's picked the wings off the Constitution in his first administration, his first term, and he's certainly aggressively trying to do it now. Are you at all relieved or partially relieved that the courts, the federal courts, the Supreme Court, are not giving the victories to Donald Trump? Do you believe that the judicial system, the wheels still are rolling and they haven't fallen off this democracy?
I'm not all that optimistic about the judicial system. I'm sorry. You have various districts coming up with various results. You have the Supreme Court, which is predictable in certain areas, but unpredictable in other areas. The Supreme Court is not my favorite court anymore. And that goes for a lot of people. He's testing it every single day. But you know what is interesting, and just trying to assimilate some of the really smart points that have been made here today, is that, Trump has a bag of tricks. One of them I mentioned is lying, but there are other things too. There's the media. We haven't seen him play out his attack on the media yet. If he finds that the media is extolling the polls, that rhymes, and then he's going to attack the media sooner or later. And we will find that the media has to pay a price. He's already attacking the nonprofit media like PBS and NPR, but he'll be attacking them all, and he is attacking them all. And if he can, undermine the media, he can undermine the effect of the polls. And I think there are other things too that we will see. I mean, look at the great dictators of the 20th century. They had a bag of tricks too, and a lot of it was fear. The communists in Eastern Europe, the brown shirts in Germany, and for that matter, Italy. He has things that he can do to terrify the public, and he's playing them out now. I think the bag of tricks includes things that will terrify people from protesting, from opposing, from being in a resistance. We haven't seen it yet. But the more threat he has to his power, the more trouble he has in rolling out his agenda, the more nasty he's going to be. And I think we're going to see that going forward.
All righty. David, recently on April 28th, there was a number of executive orders coming still out of the Oval Office. And one of them is pertaining to law enforcement. And I don't know if you saw this one or not. What was particularly disturbing is in some of the subsections about any agency using DEI that discriminates, they're going to go after those individuals. It sounded like for sanctuary cities that if there's any willful obstruction of law, that they'll go after individuals within that sanctuary city that they feel is preventing, be it Homeland Security or ICE, from doing their jobs. There's a number of provisions in this particular executive order that I found disturbing and very autocratic-like. I don't know if you saw that executive order, but what's your thought about this recent quote-unquote defense of law enforcement, which in fact it's really not. It's really an attack on politicians and or state and local officials to bend to his will about ICE and deportation enforcement.
Yeah, two things. One, he constantly complained about the Biden administration weaponizing the justice system and the legal system. That's clearly what he's doing. He's weaponizing it, going after political entities that he feels are in opposition to him. When it comes to reproductive rights, he will talk about states' rights. I'm going to leave it to the states. But what about law enforcement? It is a different principle for whichever entity you're looking at. That's apparently he believes is perfectly acceptable, but it isn't. This is a matter that should be, if they're really true to this idea that certain things like school curricula and reproductive rights should be left to states and localities, then the same holds for law enforcement. You can't take that principle and apply it with however you want to apply it. You need some consistency in applying those principles. So I think that's very disturbing. The idea that I'm gonna selectively use federal enforcement powers and claim federal jurisdiction over issues that are quite similar to other ones that I'm maintaining belong with the states. And just want to mention a couple other things, not really in response to your question, but kind of getting back to something that Chuck said about momentum building. Lending Tree, which is the online lending marketplace, reported recently that people are using buy now, pay later for groceries. And the percentage that used it a year ago was about 14%. It's now risen to 25% in 1 year, almost twice. When people have to start using buy now, pay later to eat, people should start getting very frightened. The tariffs are going to increase the digital divide in ways people haven't really thought about. Lower income individuals can't afford the most expensive technology. You start putting tariffs on the currently less expensive technology. Number one, you begin to price that population out of the technology market. Number one. And number two, profit margins on lower priced things are lower. You add a tariff onto that, which begins to cut into that profit margin. You begin to say, I can't make any money selling these lower priced technologies, so I'm just going to stop selling them. So not only are the prices going to get out of reach, the supply is going to go down as people decide that because of the consequence of these tariffs, I'm not going to be able to sell these anymore to profit. And the third thing is just to mention, in this last election, Trump got about 2.2 million more votes than Harris. There are about 75 million people that voted for Harris. So if you kind of do the math, you run the statistics. I believe that if we are going to save the country, we've got to change the representation in Congress. We've got to get the House back. We've got to get the Senate back. First, we got to get the House back in the midterms because that's the spending power. And the House has done nothing in terms of controlling the spending power. But if you look at the 75 million people that voted for Harris, and look at that 2 million plus a little bit that didn't, that's about all that would require is that if each of those 75 million people would talk to one person that they believe was a Trump supporter and try and sway that person's opinion, statistically, you can fail in that conversation 97% of the time. If only 3% of those people are successful, that's the difference. So in terms of reclaiming our country, I think if we all take a responsibility to talk to one other person that we think might be amenable to a conversation about what's happening in this country, and we're only successful 3% of the time, we can turn the electorate around. It's that close. And I support all the public outcry and the media railing.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly the independents are turning sour on the votes they did back in November 2024. The MAGA will be the MAGA. They'll stay loyal no matter what. Democrats, we know where they're going to vote, but it's the swing of the independents that I think is basically making these numbers shift on all the polling data. So I hope you're right. I do.
Yeah. So, that whole idea of do something, people don't know what to do. I'm telling you, here's something you can do.
Yeah.
Try to sway one person. And, if we're successful 3% of the time, that's about all we need.
Yeah. Take them out to dinner. Food's a great motivator. Thank you, David. Ben, James Carville early on said, don't react, just roll over. Let Trump's policies, executive orders be his demise. Let those implode and just blow up, and that'll be the end of his legacy, the GOP's forward momentum. Opposed to you is, no, don't roll over, stand up, resist now, resist loudly. Which one's going to prevail?
I think the one that will prevail is the one that says stand up now, because uniformly people who have had the experience of being in authoritarian or fascist states say that you need to react immediately when they come to power. Otherwise, you're going to lose everything. And so these first 3 months of very authoritarian action, it's pretty uniform that people say that you need to do something. I understand Carville's logic, which is the logic of let them have everything they want and blow up the economy, which they're doing anyway. but I think that the thing that I think about all the time is because some people say going to demonstrations, what's it going to do? Riding your congressman, what's that going to do, and all that. And the thing that I think about is, well, what if nobody was doing that? What would it look like if, with all this that's happening, no one was bringing those cases against Trump on this, that, or the other? Just imagine silence, what that would look like. And I'm not saying that all these things can be successful, but I'm just saying that at least it seems to me that everyone that I've read who understands this kind of situation are absolutely categoric that you need to act now at the beginning. And so I think Carville has a point. He knows vastly more than me, but a lot of people know vastly more than me, and no authoritarians are saying the exact opposite. So
yeah. When it comes to resistance, last question. When it comes to resistance, what do you think is the most effective strategy of resistance, and that which is the least effective?
I think that for anyone, the most effective kind of resistance is to just do one thing. I don't know what that thing is for them. It might be writing a letter to their congressman. It might be writing a letter to the editor of their newspaper, local newspaper. It might be talking to a neighbor. I don't know what is, but the thing is that I think the most important step is that first step of stepping out to say, I have an issue with this. And what is the most successful and what is the least successful? It's very difficult to know because this is kind of an organically developing thing. But one of the things that I think is really important is that people see other people doing this. That's why I think on Rachel Maddow, pretty much every night, she shows these, people out in Dubuque, Iowa, standing out there with signs, or pick your town in America where you would never think you'd imagine somebody, and there are people out there protesting. It gives everyone a sense that, gee, it's okay to be in disagreement, and the people who are in disagreement seem to look a lot like me. So I'm not crazy. I'm not alone, and I think that there is some consequence. For example, Senator Van Hollen probably would have gone down to El Salvador without all the pressure that's coming from people reacting. Governor Pritzker's statement that was made, I guess, yesterday in New Hampshire about it's time to fight back and get in the streets, that wouldn't have happened if there was silence. And who would have predicted those kind of things 2 months ago?
Yeah, good point. I think what I've seen that was words of hope, and it's true. Fear is infectious, but courage is infectious. And if anything, we're starting to see courage in the streets, courage in the courts, courage in the town hall meetings. And I think there is a gathering, a storm, and it's going to be pointed at the Trump administration and Donald Trump himself. Okay, thank you, Ben. Well, let's go around the virtual roundtable for last thoughts. Jay, you first.
I'm not as optimistic as some of you guys. I don't think it's the beginning, Ben. I think it's the middle. And we've already lost so much ground economically, socially, in terms of the Constitution, the branches of government, the Supreme Court. I mean, if you try to just go back for, say, 5 years, life was better then. Life is worse now. Furthermore, I think everybody makes this assumption that at the midterms, we'll have people rising up and voting against Trump's acolytes. I'm not so sure about that. It's not just the money from Elon Musk. It's the fact that Trump will be actively trying to suppress voting. He's already doing that. The Congress is already doing that. So if you think that there's going to be a fair and legal election in the midterms, I don't think that's an assumption that can be made. Okay, but I want to just add one other point. It's what is going on here? This individual is wrecking the country. You know, we talk about the wrecking ball, and it's true. He's wrecking all our institutions. He's wrecking our economy. He's wrecking our global role in the world. The reserve currency is not going to be the dollar if Xi Jinping has anything to do with it. And I think we're going to see more violence around the world. We already are, and Trump has no clue on how to deal with that. So bottom line is that just like the 20th century autocrats, Trump is or wants hard to be an autocrat. Were they sane and sober? Was Hitler or Mussolini or Stalin sane and sober? Answer, not really, not if they're trying to destroy the people in the country, the people who they're supposedly leading. Is Trump sane and sober? Answer, probably not. He's trying to destroy the very country he says he's leading. He knows better. And yet we see all these destructive things happening. And I don't think he's going to get, more sane. I don't think the people around him are going to be more sane. I think we can expect more of what we've been getting, and it's not going to be pretty. And at the end of the day, I hope the protesters rise up. I hope the voters rise up. But I think we have to watch out for all the other things that are in Trump's crazy bag of tricks.
Thank you, Jay. Chuck, let's go to you.
Well, all four of you are right. I mean, if you step back and look at what's happening here, it's a classic hostile takeover with a capital H and a capital T. And what people do in that, whether it's Michael Douglas in Wall Street, the movie, or whatever, is they grab it, they tear it down, and then they pick the assets and take them or sell them off. And that's exactly what's happening. Why would your Secretary of Interior turn over control of your most valuable resources after saying that's exactly what they are to a 20-something-year-old Doge guy with no electoral background or experience, no authority legally, to basically sell them off, the minerals, the air, the water, the parks, the land, the resources. And I think Ben is right, that when you start to see some of the institutions that have gained not only some measure of respect, but also some measure of power and leverage, Harvard, the New York Times today, standing up to Trump's attack, and others, as that begins to happen more, people will start to realize, hey, Trump is temporary. His power is temporary. Musk was there for less than 100 days. He's essentially gone. The rest of them have no power. The only reason Hegseth is still there is probably because there's no one else in the world that he could get the Senate to approve that would weaponize the Department of Defense against American citizens, because that's exactly what's going on.
All right.
That can't go anywhere good for him.
Yeah.
He has no tricks in his book, as Jay talks about, that are going to attract people over to him that are leaving that ship now.
Right. Well, it's the hangover I worry about. Yeah. So good points, Chuck. Much appreciated. Ben, to you.
I would just say that there is it is uncertain where everything is going to be, and I share Jay's concern and particular about what will happen in the future. The only thing that I can really say is that to the extent there are opportunities to confront, disagree with, dissent from things that you consider to be unacceptable in what this administration does, I think it's still important to express that, because these folks are relentless and they like to outduel themselves and how cruel they can be. And the only way you can fight that kind of thing is by actually fighting it, from what I can see anyway.
All right. David, you get the final word on this topic.
Yeah, so I was encouraged a little bit. In about a week ago, one of Trump's billionaire donors, I don't recall his name, but you can look it up, came out quite aggressively and attacked Trump, saying that the tariffs are a tremendous mistake and Donald Trump is destroying the American brand, that America is more than just a democracy unto itself, that it's a model for the world, that it is it's a beacon of hope. It is a guardian of free choice. And Donald Trump is destroying all of that. Came out very aggressively against them. If other donors who have supported him to the degree of billions of dollars start saying the same thing, well, maybe that'll have some effect, at least on the next election. They'll put their money into other candidates instead of into Donald Trump. And just one correction, I was thinking about the numbers I put out a few minutes ago, and I pointed the 2.2 million margin in the difference between Harris and Trump. You don't have to regain that 2.2 difference. You really only have to regain half of that difference to turn the election. So thinking of Ben's suggestion, do something. You talk to somebody you believe is a Trump supporter who might be amenable to at least a conversation. And if everybody who voted for Harris does that with one person, and they're successful, 1.5% of the time, you will turn the majority of the electorate. I mean, that's how close things are. So I hope everybody can at least, if they can't do anything else, that they can talk to somebody they know, maybe for a long time, that has different political allegiance, and make an effort to turn that person around.
All right. Well, we hope our listeners take your advice. We've run out of time, so I'd like to thank my special esteemed guests, Mr. David Larson, Mr. Ben Davis, Mr. Charles Crumpton. I'd like to thank them for their keen observations and sage comments. And I'd like to thank my co-host, who's always making keen observations and sage comments, my co-host, Jay Fidell. So why don't you join us for our next episode of American Issues Take One next week. I'm Tim Apicella, your host. And until then, aloha.